simple course layout to its amazing pro shop, Jason Linhart and the staff at Ocala Golf offer everything that you need for your golf outing. That's the Ocala Golf Club. Experience country club style golf at municipal prices. You won't go wrong with the Ocala Golf Club. Call them for a tee time today, 352-401-6917.
It's rodeo time in Ocala. The 39th annual Ocala Shrine Rodeo returns to the Southeastern Livestock Pavilion September 3rd and 4th, 7:30 nightly. Witness the superstars of the PRCA as cowboys ride to help children walk. For tickets and information, check out OcalaShrineRodeo.com for broncs, bulls, and babes. The Ocala Shrine Pro Rodeo, September 3rd and 4th, 7:30 nightly.
This is Ocala Talks with Tom Schmidt, bringing stories that are important to our community in and around Ocala. Plus, of course, a splash of sports as well. Now, here's your host, Tom.
Good Monday morning. Welcome to hour number 3 of Ocala Talks. I'm your host, Tom Schmidt, coming to you from the Palatial Studios, WOCA Radio Show, off the runway at the Ocala International Airport. In studio with me is a very good friend of mine, a person who I use as a confidant when I need some questions. I use him as a resource. He says anytime that I need him to give him a call, and I've done it on numerous occasions. He was very integral in keeping me in the forefront of news with Common Sense with Tom Schmitz when I left the radio show some 4 years ago and opened up my own video production company. He was very integral in helping me with advice and stuff to get that up off the ground. I'm talking about former county commissioner and former state representative and now retiree Charlie Stone. Charlie, good morning.
Good morning, Tom.
How's that sound for you to be former county commissioner, former state representative, retiree Charlie Stone?
Well, I've always heard the best title you can have is the past county commissioner and the past House member. But it sounds good. I'm really enjoying it, Tom.
A little birdie, though, has told me you're working more now retired than you did when you were in public life.
That could be very true. You know, one of the main differences today, though, is I kind of pick and choose what I want to do versus what the general public or some committee chair or some House member or Speaker of the House wants you to do every day. So it's a better job. You were in Tallahassee on that fateful day, March 17th, 2020. Correct.
When the governor shut it down.
Correct.
He was going with information he'd gotten from Washington, from the Trump administration, the CDC, Anthony Fauci. You were in Tallahassee that day. What was that day like? Do you remember that day and what it was like for somebody to say the entire state that you work for has closed its doors to business?
I remember it very well, very vivid, actually. It'll be a day that will live with me forever. We were actually in the chambers discussing bills that had been presented on the floor. We took a small recess, but we wasn't allowed to leave the chambers. We had 2 of our members that had tested positive for the COVID virus, and they were concerned that their association in and around the other House members and staff, although they didn't have the symptoms, but they had returned from a trip in Washington, D.C., where many people had tested positive. So be on the safe side, they locked the chamber, they so-called quarantined us for several hours. Every House member, every staff member had to go through an evaluation. We went into this separate conference room. They had medical personnel there. They had treatment if you needed it. But each one of us went in one at a time, and they would ask you a series of questions, primarily about your activities over the last 10 days. Had you been so-and-so or with so-and-so? That took the better part of the day. We had 120 House members and, I don't know, probably 40 staff members that had to go through that process. Even after you were evaluated, you were still required to stay in premises. Toward the end, they did allow us to go back to our office in the members' office area. Although we wasn't allowed to have visitors, and they told us, besides you and your staff, no one else can enter your suite. It was a very trying day.
Yeah, I would think, because now your wife's here, your son's here, you got people in Marion County who are saying, "Charlie, you okay?" Stuff like that. I mean,
exactly.
it'd be difficult.
Our phone was ringing off the hook. I probably had no less than 50 text messages from individuals that had heard about the lockdown and wanted to know how serious it was, how many people were being tested. There was really no way of knowing the results because as you exited, they asked you to not share any information with your fellow house members or staff.
Yeah, because it was almost like a scarlet letter. If you had at the very beginning of this, if you had COVID, that was like a letter on your chest. Get away from me, because we didn't know anything about it.
We didn't, and we always assumed the worst, that if you got it, it was, going to be very, very dramatic. So, but that day was a long day. Actually, the next day was even almost as bad, as because we didn't know minute by minute where we were actually going to be reconvening or not, and there were still issues that needed to be debated on the floor. So we all agreed to stay in town and nobody leave, based on they gave us a 30-minute prior notice if we were going to convene. They did hold some committee work, but I don't think we convened at all that day. The following day from the testing, we were required to stay in Tallahassee for I think it was the next 3 days to see what was going on before they would actually release us.
Well, that had to be tried, because once it's shut down, now you got a ghost town in Tallahassee because the university's closed, the government's closed, the buildings around you closed. Tallahassee is if you've never been to Tallahassee, I can't believe you're Floridian and never been to Tallahassee, but if you've never been to Tallahassee, it is probably the most bustling small town, big town you'll ever see, because it's not Orlando or Tampa or Jacksonville. It's more like a cross between Gainesville and Ocala together. It's got a small town feel to it, but it bustles constantly. It's constantly moving.
Absolutely. It's a bustling. And it's not uncommon to see many, many groups organized on the street corners conducting business.
Right.
In fact, I did a large share of my visitation. Instead of having people come to my office and I'd say, hey, I'll meet you on the corner or whatever, and we'd chat for 15 minutes or so, because anytime that they enter the Capitol, a visitor has to go through the screening process, and it takes them a while to get through that. So it's easier for me to go down and, my office was convenient that I could just go downstairs, walk out the door, and I'm right there in the corner.
There.
So I would say a good portion of the legislation actually occurs on street side.
I mean, you had to do what you had to do, because the business of Florida still needed to get done on a daily basis.
Exactly.
We closed the state, but not really. The business still had to work. There were still things that had to be done.
Yeah, that's what I thought was pretty interesting. As we did get released from the Capitol and we were allowed to get out on the street side, you notice the business were still trying to operate, and delivery trucks were still making deliveries. So I thought, government is shut down, but businesses are still trying to operate.
Well, the restaurants and bars, they shut them down.
They did.
Because COVID could recognize a restaurant or a bar above a dress shop or a Lowe's or something, and it would go in there.
Real smart virus.
It was very smart. And by the way, it could recognize if you were walking around without a mask on, but if you were sitting at a table without a mask on, it couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Couldn't see it. So, but I mean, a place like Tallahassee, because I've been there numerous times. I've even seen you there a couple of times with the. I've been to the Capitol Grill, which is right there next to Capitol, and it's always full. I went there about 3 months into the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it was a ghost town.
Yeah.
There was, I mean, literally, and I was walking, and a cop out, what is your business here today? And I told him my business. He told me where to go and everything. But they were very strict on people being around town and everything, as they should be. But now the governor makes a decision to open the state back up, because he goes, when does the problem
Worse than
when is the shutdown worse than the problem?
Yeah.
So he opened the state back up after about, I think it was 8-9 weeks is where we opened the state back up, and he's been catching a lot of flack for that.
He has.
Was that something that his office gave notice to you guys in the legislature that, hey, we're looking about opening this back up as quickly as possible?
Yes, sir. We were constantly in communication with the governor's office through emails or text messages. I was pretty fortunate that I had kind of an inside person in the governor's office. It wasn't the chief of staff, but it was one of the deputy chiefs. So he was constantly texting me and telling me, hey, the governor's considering this. And they were actually polling us. Hey, what's going on back home? What's in your community? How do you feel about it? And of course, I'm sure they were getting a full array of answers, because the COVID actually affected some communities much more than it did other communities. And what the governor was testing was, or trying to analyze was, how can we do something broad-based that won't penalize the ones that don't have much COVID, but still be effective to the ones that do have COVID? So yeah, we were in constant communication. In fact, I told somebody the other day, I got more communication with the governor's office during that 8 or 9 weeks than I did 6 years earlier. So
Marion County was thought to be a place that needed to be very, very careful because of our retirement community and everything here. And the older you were, the more susceptible you were to the virus killing you. Originally was what was thought. I mean, it's come out now that about 99% of the people got it did not die from it.
Right.
But at the time we did not know that. It was very unknown. So that had to be, out of all the stuff you did and all the time you were in Tallahassee, for your end to run to be during COVID, it had to be a little surreal for you.
It was. It was a challenging time, to say the least. I can only remember one other incident that happened that really threw us off base more than the COVID, or is equal to the COVID, and that was the school shooting at Parkland. And
right.
That just pretty much killed our session.
Certainly.
We went into the mode of trying to enact legislation for school safety. So that took a lot out of us that particular session. But COVID actually, I think, had more of an impact statewide, because I was talking to my buddies and my friends out in the Panhandle, and they were handling it totally different than my friends down in Key West.
Yeah.
It was just a different situation.
Callahan, where I'm from, Callahan, Florida, and Jacksonville are side by side. Callahan handled it completely opposite of the way Jacksonville handled it.
Right.
And somebody goes, yeah, but Callahan's a little bitty small town. Jacksonville's a big metropolitan. Actually, Jacksonville's not a big metropolitan area. It's a little bitty town spread out over a 35-mile county.
Right.
It's Jacksonville. Everybody thinks Jacksonville's this big metropolis. It's spread out a lot and like White House and not McLennan, but that Baldwin. All, they didn't have to be on lockdown the same way that urban Jacksonville was, but they were because they're in Jacksonville.
Right.
Whereas Callahan did it completely different. Marion County did it different than Alaska County did it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Side by side, but two different ideologies. When was it political almost immediately, Charlie?
It became political very quickly. Yes, it did. One of the things that I thought was kind of unusual is that you had the medical community actually step up and say things that was totally unproven. In other words, we had the medical societies calling us and sending us emails that this virus is going to wipe out half of Florida or more. We got to shut down. Some of them actually wanted to go in total lockdown that you couldn't even leave your house.
Well, they predicted 20 to 30 million people would die.
Right, exactly. So I thought, the medical community normally, unless there's a side benefit to them, they normally wouldn't get involved in statewide politics like that. So I was concerned, and I actually contacted my local physician and asked him his opinion of it. And he said, hey, look, you got to be cautious because we don't know the strength of this virus and what it can do. But he wasn't for shutting down the whole entire state. So I thought it was a little strange that you had several groups that wanted to do things to benefit them, which is not unusual, I guess, but other groups that was totally opposite of that.
Very weird that it happened in an election cycle year as well. It was a national election, and so it was easy to politicize it because of the election that was coming up.
It was very easy. In fact, we had candidates file to run for office on that I can do a better job of handling COVID than so-and-so.
So-and-so, right.
So,
yeah.
So,
I will tell you this. In 2018, I voted for Adam Putnam. I know Adam. Adam's from Bartow. He's lifelong Floridian farmer. You know, his daddy was a farmer. He was commissioner of agriculture. I thought Adam was very well suited for the job of governor.
it was.
Ron DeSantis holds a rally in Tampa, gets Donald Trump to tell everybody vote for Ron DeSantis.
That is.
He flipped the switch. He won the governor, and I was like, I don't know. I think Adam's a better guy. I will tell you this. Adam Putnam, great guy. Don't get me wrong. I like Adam. He's very good. The right guy for the job was in the office when it happened.
Exactly.
Ron DeSantis, nobody could have done the job that our governor's done with this situation.
He has absolutely been an outstanding governor handling this, not only the COVID situation, but other events that's come along his way. We had the red tide. We've had a number of incidents come along, and he stepped up to the plate.
Hurricane Michael was the year before, wiped out almost the whole panhandle.
He's done an excellent job, and I'm very proud of our governor. I'm happy to do what I can for him.
I don't think he's long for us, though.
I don't think so.
I think he probably runs in 2022, but in 2024, he may get a higher calling.
Yeah.
I really think.
And
look, Naval Lawyer, served his country, great family man. I will tell you, in 2018, I didn't think he was the right guy for the job. I was wrong. No. He was the only guy for that job.
He is the right man. And other than you, Tom, I don't know if
No, you don't want me. You don't want me.
Anybody else could be.
I would shoot people. You don't want me to. You don't want me to do that. Hey, let's talk for a minute about something that I know you helped do through legislation, and maybe not. It didn't happen while you were there, but you put a lot of length into it and all, working towards something that people may or may not agree with, but it has to be done, and that's the agreement that has to be reached every now and then between the Seminole Indian Nation and the Florida legislature and the government of Florida. And that has to do with what a lot of people think is, they're throwing Florida away with gambling and everything, but by the way, they're on their own land. It's their sovereign land. We have to work in partnership with them so we can make some money from them, because really, if they wanted to, they could just go to the Department of Interior and leave us out of the whole conversation.
That they could.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of talk about the new gambling pact that was passed this year. It's going to go into effect with sports betting and all, and roulette wheels now coming and craps tables now coming. Charlie, was that inevitable?
Yes, it was. It was bound to happen. Whether it was going to happen this past session or in some future session, it was bound to happen. Sports betting and off-track betting and things like that it's here. We might as well learn to deal with it. The original compact with the Seminole tribe was a 20-year agreement,
right? And
it had expired actually several years ago, but they just kept
good faith
and kept operating it. But I'm not that familiar with the new agreement that the governor has worked out. I think it's a pretty good agreement in the sense that it's going to generate a lot of tax revenue.
$1 billion to the state of Florida.
And when you boil it down, that's really what it's about, is how can we do the legalized type portion of gambling and control it and still make it a revenue generating identity. And I think the Seminole tribe, that's what they want, and that's what the governor wanted. So I think it's going to be a pretty good contract. It's
been a good partnership the entire time it's been around. I go back to the old days when you would go sit in a metal building in Tampa, where the casino is now. It was a metal building. You'd buy cigarettes at a discounted rate at one end of the building.
Right.
You'd have bingo in the middle of the building, big bingo parlor, and then you'd have poker at the other end of the table, where once the pot got past $10, you couldn't bet anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was nickel, dime, quarter poker. Once it got to $10, couldn't bet anymore. There was no skill involved in it whatsoever. And the smoke hung about 2 foot above the floor. You were taking your life into your own hands.
Sure.
But it's really from that point on what the Seminoles have done. They bought the Hard Rock franchise. They own every except the one Hard Rock casino in Vegas. They don't own that one. No. But every other Hard Rock restaurant, casino, everything they own. It was inevitable this was going to happen. And for people to – sometimes, Charlie, people don't like progress. That's what it is.
Well, Tom, I'm not naturally a gambling person.
No.
I don't believe in taking my hard-earned money and giving
it
it
to
away
somebody else
based on some. But at the same time, if that's your choice and that's what you want to do, as long as you do it within the parameters that society expects you to do, then I have no problem with it. For years and years, we talked about the sports betting, and I was not necessarily in favor of sports betting in the beginning because I felt like that might put too much pressure on the sports and players, teams.
Especially colleges and all,
right.
the younger kids.
But we worked on an agreement that I think is going to help the college athletes. The last year I was in office, and that had to do with you could utilize your name and get some rewards for it.
Certainly.
So, it's still in its infant stages, so I'm not sure how it's going to turn out in the long run. But I think just having the athletes with a name ID that was able to capitalize on that is going to help those athletes.
You know, we got about 3 minutes. Can you stay over just a little bit?
I can stay as long as you want me.
You're retired. That's right.
I'm retired.
You're retired. You can stay as long as I want to. Because I want to get into what you're doing now that you're not at the state. And I want you to give us a little insight on what Mr. Harding may be looking at in his first time up there at the state, because I'm sure that your first time up at the state was a little different than anything you suspected what it was going to be.
Yes, sir.
We're talking with former county commissioner and former state representative Charlie Stone. He is now retired Charlie Stone. He's just a representative of our community. Now, Charlie, do you live in the city or you live in the county?
I'm in the county, sir.
Boy, you're a lucky one, aren't you? Just like me. We're not even going to talk about city politics.
Good.
Because, well, we can talk about City of Denellen if you want to.
We can.
It is, you listen to 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, WOCA. The Source will be right back after this short timeout.
Hello, gorgeous.
Hi, this is Becky at Hello Gorgeous Salon. It's time to get that new look started. Let's get rid of those sun damaged ends and